How many times in life, for especially us women, that we do a million and one things and we put ourselves on the back burner time and time again? Even when I say I shouldn't, I should be there, I don't. And how many times do we end up ignoring our own health, our own selves? It happens far too much. And today we want to talk about that because we have a very special guest. Nicole, welcome. And how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm just really excited that our guest is here with us. I read her bio and I'm like, wow, pretty darn amazing. So this is going to be a fun interview and it's going to be an informative interview. So I'm looking forward to introducing her and bringing her up to our stage.
Well, go for it.
I'm going to go for it. And as this lady, I mean, it's just so incredible. She's a bench scientist, which I've never heard of that. So I'm going to ask her what that is. She is a 44-year veteran in preventative medicine and in the health and wellness industries. So she knows what she's talking about. And this is right up my alley. So I got really excited. She's also a certified transformational life coach, but she teaches yoga, which I love. She is a Reiki master, which I am. And she does the emotional freedom technique. She is also the owner of Tranquil Hearts Wellness. So I would like to welcome to our stage Cindy Edington.
Hello,
Hi,
Cindy.
Hi, Cindy. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you for inviting me in today. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes, I'm so excited because when, I'm a Reiki master also, and I love when we all understand each other. Glenda does yoga and, she knows how important it is for health. But the first thing I saw was that you were a bench scientist, and I don't know what that is. Can you tell me what is that?
Well, so this goes way, way back.
Okay.
Yeah, when I first started off in science, I actually worked, they call it on the bench. So actually doing experiments on the bench. So I actually worked in infectious disease for quite a few years. So I worked on the bench doing different experiments to basically come up and develop. At that time, I was working in pediatric and geriatric vaccine development. And so that's what that means. I actually worked on the bench as a scientist, working actually in virology. So I worked as a bench virologist.
Wow. And that's such a long career. What have you seen like from the start through like COVID vaccines? How much has it changed?
Wow. Well, quite a bit. It's very, very different. And of course, now I got to say, I've been out of it, for the past 5 years. So my career spanned 35 some odd years just I would say, in the clinical research sector. And so I spent a lot of time in infectious disease, obviously in vaccines as well. When I left, things had changed quite a bit from when I first started. There's so many companies doing so much in terms of trying to look at different diseases and actually get into how can we prevent these diseases. I mean, we're talking, again, many, many years ago. At that time, there was only a few companies working on it. And when I started, it was a tiny, teeny little startup company called Praxis Biologics. And that company is now called Pfizer.
Oh, my gosh.
I can tell you how many, that's how, what a behemoth. And when I started in the company, I was employee number 49.
Oh, wow.
So it's really amazing how far, in terms of technology, how much the technology has really changed. I mean, back in the day, it took years and light years to literally get to the point where you would actually have a product out into the market. And now just with technology, the way it is, they can move things so much quicker, through the processes that they need to in terms of showing safety, et cetera. So that's just one part of the career. But yeah, I spent a good amount of time working in that sector.
Yeah, because it was my understanding that you had to have all kinds of testing. So I was really surprised with COVID, how quick that vaccine came out.
You still do. And so here's the thing, it's as long as they're proving safety. So again, the backbone that they're using, again, I'll put my science hat on here, but I am not in the complete loop in terms of what they've done. Like I said, I've been out of it for quite a few years now in terms of being on the bench. But I know that technology has moved forward, what years forward in terms of like what they can do. And so the testing, again, they're not going to put anything out there that hasn't been tested to a certain degree in terms of safety testing. And so with that, there can be a certain level of comfort, right? That they have at least done I would say, all of the steps that they needed to, all right, to get an emergency or an authorization in terms of an emergency use approval. And then it's going to be in the market for a good amount of time, and they're just going to keep collecting the data. But there is a whole criterion of what they need to do before they can possibly even put it out there. Of course, now you're in a pandemic situation too, so that again puts a little bit different shine and light on things. But still, you've got the FDA is looking at all of this stuff very carefully, scrutinizing it. They're not going to allow something out there that they feel is going to like harm somebody. So, I mean, bottom line, I felt comfortable, again, as a former bench scientist when it came out, and I still have a lot of colleagues that work at Pfizer. I got on the phone and like, hey, tell me more, like, tell me more. Again, we all have to have that comfort level of feeling. Yeah.
Well, it's probably not just the comfort level, legally, the last thing that they want is something to start happening and then having lawsuits because, that's a huge, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we understand that, even though that they rushed a lot of things to market because of the situation that they're in, you got to realize that they're putting their own lives on jeopardy, so they can't do things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's unfortunate that it got so politicized.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting that people were, and again, I'm apolitical here at all. Yeah. But I just found it interesting, again, as a former bench scientist, and looking at, Fauci was getting so much flack, and it's like, it's going to evolve. People didn't understand that this is a new and novel virus that's out there. And viruses' main mission is to survive. And so it's going to constantly mutate and whatever so that it can keep going. And so I found it interesting because, again, if you don't understand, I have that background, I think, in science, and I'm not trying to sound, conceited or condescending to folks that don't. But if you don't have that background, I think it's really difficult then to understand. And you're like, well, what do you mean? You said this, now you're saying this. Well, because it's going to evolve. And to keep up with that can be difficult, especially if you don't have that background. So, I mean, I understand why you saw well, wait a minute, and so it ended up being, this big, thing that it probably never should have gotten to that point. It's unfortunate, but we evolve and grow in every aspect, don't we?
Don't we all? Absolutely. So after such a great career, what made you start to, turn to another direction, or what was happening in your...
So we got to go way back for this. So what ended up happening is I went through a heartbreaking event, or what I refer to actually now as a heart opening event. So, I went through a heartbreaking divorce, and that's what really led me down this it's a whole journey and path. And this is like, 30 years in the making. It started with that. Having this, basically, finding out. So a little bit about the story. The weekend that I found out that I was pregnant is the same weekend my ex-husband decided he didn't want to be married anymore. And then I didn't even know how to tell him that I was having his child. So we'll set that aside, table that. But this is how it started. So it's like, okay. So we split when our daughter was probably about 9 months old, and I did not have a lot of resources, and I didn't have a lot of support. And so I had to get very resourceful. I'll put it that way. And so one of the things that I did was I like to work out. That was part of the way that I de-stressed from the stressors of the day job, so to speak. Absolutely. And so I looked for what can I create in terms of a win-win-win situation? Because my whole philosophy was, all right, I got thrown a lemon. How can I make this into a lemonade right now? And so I decided to become a fitness instructor. And that's where this started, is that I could actually get a free gym membership. So I didn't have to pay for it anymore because I didn't have the money to do that now.
I get you.
Right? I could actually, and then I'm learning something so I could teach a class and get paid for it. So not only that, I get free and get paid. Oh,
Yeah.
and we had a mini daycare so I could take my daughter. So it was like, woohoo, this is how it all began.
I hear you.
From there though, it ended up, I ended up doing all kinds of different things fitness wise, in terms of like cardio kickboxing and this and that and the other thing. And then down the line, I'd say several years down the line, one of my colleagues was a yogi. And he said, Cindy, he goes, I was always searching to grow and learn. I wanted to keep growing and learning. And he said, come to a yoga class. So I'm like, okay. And he was Kundalini. And so I'm like, we go there. And I'm used to like, boxing and whatever, high impact stuff. And we go and we sit down in this class, and it wasn't a lot of movement. It was a lot of breathing. It was chanting. We sang a song at the end of class. We ate an apple. And I was like, it was just so interesting. But the thing is when I got up and I walked out of that class, it was like another, it was like this major aha. I was like, I literally felt like I was walking on air when I walked out of that class. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need more of that. And then I just started doing more self excavation, so to speak. And I started to really realize how unhappy I was because I had been seeking, and this came from the divorce, because I went into complete perfectionism modality because I had a limiting belief that the only way I was lovable was to be perfect.
Wow. And we all know that's impossible.
Oh, right. But at the time,
yeah,
I was like unconscious. I wasn't even thinking, oh, that's a limiting belief. This is what's going on. It was like, I just had this feeling. And of course, I had other messages that came from family members that was like, this kind of like, what did you do, in terms of, getting the divorce. And so I just really felt like, oh my gosh, it's all, I blamed and shamed myself. And the only way I was going to get around that was to be perfect in every single aspect. And so with the yoga was like, oh my gosh, it was the first time that I actually was able to like settle down with inside of myself and just be. And it was so heart opening for me because I just realized how much external validation. It was all of what I was seeking in terms of approval was coming from all of these different places and people. And it left me feeling so empty inside. And because I'm a very happy person and empathic and giver, I felt exhausted and drained all the time, but no one was giving back to me. I didn't know how to fill myself at that time.
Of course.
So yoga was the first entree in.
Well, we certainly understand, and if anybody understands you, it's definitely Nicole and I, because we both have gone through similar journeys and touching on it so many different ways. But here's the thing, most people, and I saw this through other groups when I was going through, most people when you're going through really high level divorces where you're so strained and so most people either eat themselves up, manually eating food till they're exploding, drinking, smoking, and those things that are really knocking you down. There's not as many people that go into the other way. And I understand, because I was the same way, like even at the beginning when I really didn't want to be around others because I was feeling so much, I said the same thing. You look at yourself and you blame yourself and what did you do? Maybe you're not pretty enough, good enough, whatever. And so I started out with putting exercise tapes on at night once my kids went to sleep. And I started working out that way to getting rid of all that anxiety right before I even hit the gym. So it's really a different mindset right at that point that you're actually going in that avenue. Because I saw how different I was later on. Because of course, when you initially go through it, you're on your own. You don't hear, and especially in those days, people aren't talking a lot about the divorce scene.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, this was decades ago for me. And it was like, so much shame, and people didn't talk about it. I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing about what's happening now, right now. There's so much of an opening and so much more information available with technology and, with the social media. I mean, that to me is a dual-edged sword there too. But, but I'm just saying that there's so much more information out there that you can get support from. And back then, it was like, where do you go? I mean,
and it's also the acknowledgement of that you're going through this now. Now we're in a different world. Now we understand of limiting beliefs and having that negative mindset and so forth. But in those days, none of that was real. That wasn't topic of conversation.
Oh yeah, it was like, what's wrong with you? Just move on.
Exactly. Exactly. I've had so many people tell me that you've got to get over it. And that was not that long ago. And it's like, you don't just jump over something and go on, you have to heal the inside before you can just get over it. And so that was some really bad advice from men. Well, I did. Good for you. Now, where do you go with that?
Well, exactly. And you know what? And somewhere down the line, there's going to be some kind of explosion that happens because again, I was like, okay, I didn't want to feel any of my feelings back then. So I got to be master at tucking. Oh, I don't want to feel that now. I can't feel that now because I had a baby too. And so I was like, I can't be this snivelly. I'm telling myself, I can't be this sniveling, crying thing, crumpled thing in the corner. I got to buck up here. You know what I mean? It's like, I got to do all the right things here right now. I don't have time for any of that. So, but then years later.
Well, yeah, that whole time we're bucking up, what we're actually doing is just putting armor over armor over armor on our heart. And it's just, it's there and it's encased in metal, just almost impenetrable. And that's how I was. And so when we started having, like you said, all these articles come out, or you can research things, and it's like, this is amazing. So many things that not only did I learn, but I learned I could do in modalities and to help myself. And that saved my life.
Yeah.
So as you progressed by going into yoga, and then you obviously continued on studying and then developing more and more, like your Reiki and so forth?
Yeah. So the next I'll go pivotal moment here. The next pivotal, again, my big was so about 12 years ago now, I actually decided to shift my yoga the way. So I, again, taught a lot of different types of yoga classes, but I wanted to get more into, again, back 25 some odd years ago when I started, yoga was still this woo-woo thing, right? Yeah. I mean, not a lot of people did it. And so my thing was, because I was teaching fitness classes, was I brought yoga into the gym. And so it became yet another class. And so to me, yoga it's much more than just the asana or the movement piece of it, right? It's the whole lifestyle. And so probably about 12 years ago, yoga therapy came into the realm. And I was so interested in that because I wanted to, start working with people that couldn't necessarily go to a class, that they needed something more. And so yoga therapy really was it encompassed all of what yoga is, right? It's looking at, what are you doing for breathing? What are you doing for dietary? What are you doing for your lifestyle? What's your spiritual connections? All of that. And so I moved into that. And that's when I had my big, when I say, because I still, for all those years, was still tucking. And so one of the yogis was he did yoga for grief relief. And I can't even remember exactly what we were doing. We were doing these like big postures and like guttural breathing. And he was saying certain things, and whatever it was, all I know is I literally crumpled on the ground and started bawling.
Wow.
I mean, uncontrollably. And of course, what a way to have everybody exit the room. All these women exited. He came over and just sat by me. And I was shaking, and I'm like, I don't know what happened. I'm like, I literally was just like, I had no idea what had happened. And he was a somatic therapist as well. And so I hired him. I'm like, I want to work with you. And really what it came down to is because I had tucked so much for so many years, I really had just lost my sense of self, of doing all this self-work, but yet I still had this loss of self, so much grief that I had tucked away that had never been allowed to be expressed. You know, because I was too afraid to take my armor off. I had armor, as you said, my armor was so thick, it was impenetrable, and he pierced through it and
Wow.
split me wide open. And I was like, oh my Lord, like what just happened? And so again, just one more piece of the journey. And I spent probably about 3 to 4 years with him of just, the big message was, Cindy, you got to sit in your sadness. And I was trained not to cry, you know,
Yeah.
don't cry. That's weak, you know, be strong, buck up, push through. You don't do those things, right? And so again, these were all of the messages that I had received early on that I was carrying into adulthood. And he broke through all that. And I was like, yeah, but I don't want to sit like, who wants to sit in sadness? I was like, this is crazy. And I'm like, he's like, I'm telling you right now, your path to healing is to allow yourself to sit in those feelings. And it took a while for me to learn that it was okay to sit in those feelings. I mean, I had to give myself, he was giving me permission, but I had to give myself permission to say, okay, it's okay. Then I'm going to sit here. And if I feel sad, don't push it away. Don't get up. Don't try to do something to like make myself happy. You know, just sit in it for a while. And it's okay to sit in it. And
feel it.
And I allowed more things then to come up and come out. And to me, that was probably, again, one of the big pivotal moments for me in my own personal healing journey.
Wow.
And it's so important, right? So many people don't want to feel that sadness or make themselves so busy. Or, you know, the other thing is I remember that I lost a friend at that point in time when she said to me, you know what, you're always crying. Like, you know what, I just don't want to be around you anymore. And it's like, you know, like I sat back and I was like, I'm always crying. Like, you don't know what this world is like when you have no money and have babies to feed and can't figure anything out at this point. And yeah, it sometimes can be a very cruel world.
Yes.
You know, so learning that, and I feel the same way, is you can't run away from your problems. You got to deal with them. You got to feel them, because that's the only way you really solve them.
Right. Absolutely. And, you know, I'm sorry that someone didn't hold space for you. You know, when you talk about her saying she didn't want to be around you, that just seems so like her heart actually needed to get some armor off it, because she wasn't empathetic to your plight. And, you know, I was very lucky. I had friends hold space for me for a long time.
That's why I do what I do, because I was very much alone during that time. A lot of people closed doors.
Wow.
And a lot of judgment. Yeah. And it's, you know, when you're going through and all your people around are still in marriages, and even though they're not happy marriages, but they're in their marriages, and everybody is criticizing, and they're making their own figuring out, thinking about where you are or how blessed you're going to be in your life moving forward. They've all made judges of what your new life is going to be, or why you did what you did. And when you see the hardness, is what I felt. That's why, you know, it led me down the road of wanting to help others and feeling that nobody else should be alone. It's a very hard world at times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So having that, knowing what you did, and having that special person who built that for you, that safe space, so to say, right, gave you that time, that must have made a major change in you to begin with. Oh,
definitely. Yeah, I can't say enough about it. I mean, it was just such a pivotal moment for me in terms of healing. Yeah. I can't say enough about it.
And what a huge feeling of growth that comes from that healing. Because,
yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because when we don't grow, what ends up happening is you're still going to start attracting the same person already been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was it for me too, as I knew immediately that I needed to figure out who I was. Who am I after all this? Because it changes us. It changes us, mentally, physically. And as you look at things in a big scope, what I did is I looked back and I'm like, I've always picked the same person, which means there was always the same outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did learn a lot from it. And what I'm learning now is I still need to figure out who I am. I still need to love myself enough to never do that again.
Yeah, I'll tell you that my now husband, because I'm remarried and it took a long time. So I actually, I met my husband was my now husband was my aerobic instructor from way back when. So we've known each other a very, very long time.
Yes.
And I mean, and he chased after me for a very, very long time, because I tell you the armor of not, so this was again, the other lesson is that having this heart opening allowed me to have more connectedness with him. Because I think that's one of the things that it costed me. And I'll say it, I say to him, I don't know how he stood by me for so many years. Because internally I was pushing him away on so many levels because I didn't trust.
Sure.
I honestly did not. I was with my ex almost 9 years. We had a child together. And, and so to me, it was like, I just didn't feel like I could fully trust him. And so
Yeah.
it cost me having the intimate relationship that I really wanted to have. It cost me. I'm still working on that. I'm just now, even now, these past 5 years since I left the corporate world and am doing all of my passion work full time now, I'm just starting to really recognize how much I did push him away. I mean, again, more aha moments come up, and how I'm really trying to embrace more connection, more connectivity, and embracing that, because I was just so afraid to like put my heart out there, to have somebody else like stomp on it again. I just didn't even know if I could handle that kind of, like, as you both know, it's pain.
Painful.
It's physical, guttural pain when you're in that kind of situation. And who wants to experience that? I think the human condition is we run away from pain as much as we possibly can, right?
Yes, exactly.
So,
But it's a huge thing, and I'm hoping that anyone is watching this, whether it's live or on replay, realizes that this in itself is a journey, and it's okay. Like, we have to realize that it's okay to not feel good, and it's okay to to allow ourselves to sort of fall apart. Because what I realized at one point in my life is my breakdown was actually my breakthrough.
Mhm.
yeah.
And that is so important, that we can realize that in ourselves and be strong for that, because it comes forth, so when you break down, things fall out. You get those aha moments, correct? That allow you to come back and sort of, like I always say, it's time to put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's through those times when we learn what we want and what we don't want. Because
Or who we want and who we don't want.
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. And one thing I figured out too is that, you think you've got so much together maybe by the time you're in your late 20s or your 30s. And it's like, I know now that life is a learning process, and we morph into many different characters or just versions of ourselves as we go. And that's helped me accept more of who I am, what I desire, what I don't desire. And it's a process should be a process till we, take our last breath.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I couldn't agree more, because to me, somebody said this somewhere, and it's like, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I totally
Yes.
resonate and believe that wholeheartedly. It's it's the continual growth, learning new things, doing different things. The whole limiting beliefs thing that came to me 5 years ago, when I decided to like jump into the passion work. I wanted, went through coaching school as well, and that's another that's one of the other side things that I was doing, as well. I was losing one of my jobs, and my friends were saying, Cindy, you should be a coach, because I was doing so much in the yoga space. And they were all coming to me because I was feeling grounded, right? So they're coming to me with all their issues. And so I ended up graduating from Coach U. And so again, all these side jobs that I was doing because I needed the finances as well. But I knew in my heart that was something that just so resonated with me, and I wanted to do that. And so the end of 2019, you know, I turned 60 and I said, you know, enough. My daughter's on her own. She got married. She's got her own kids now. I finally felt like I could actually do what I truly wanted to do. And not to say that my career in science was not wonderful. It was. But all this passion stuff, you know, the work that I was doing on the side was all the stuff that was filling my soul, you know? And so I jumped ship in 2019 and then launched my business in 2020 and COVID hit. And I thought I was actually going to be doing yoga therapy full time. And I had to pivot. And so I went back in and buffed coaching skills and really got into another program where it just literally was, again, another pivotal moment for me, where it opened me up to even see more of like, oh my gosh, the whole programming and all the negative messaging and, you know, what's been handed down generationally and societally and culturally and institutionally. And it was like, you know, another big mind-blowing moment for me. And it was just another, again, big leap of growth in terms of what patterns was I still holding on to? You know, what were the things that were getting in the way? What were the blocks that I still didn't see? And so it was just another, you know, full year of growth that has led me now to like how I've brought that all into how I coach clients right now as well, you know, and just in terms of all of what I learned there. So pivotal, I think, in terms of growth, because we got to see it, right? And again, all this work that I've been doing, you know, for myself to feel better, whatever, it's still, you know, the mirror's here, right? I can't see my nose because it's right up against me. And so just to be able to like have that kind of space again, to say, wow, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize how much of a like scarcity mentality, you know, I still possess it. I've been working on it, but I see it more. And so now that I see it more, I can release it more. But I mean, just things like that where, you know, growth is so important.
And I love the fact that, you know what, you said that you're 16, you were just beginning, because I have one very big message to people is because I had to reinvent myself at the age of 52 when my second relationship had ended, and I had to go back to the beginning and start figuring out all of these things. And the one thing that I hear constantly, what drives me crazy, is the fact that, oh, I'm too old. And it's like, you're never too old to begin again. You're never too old to make the changes, to see what's going on in your soul. And these are the things that it's important, because never mind is the message about to keep going no matter what, because who knows when the end is going to be coming. So you may as well enjoy yourself while you're here and continue to grow and learn and never know what's coming. But us as older, more mature, wiser women, I believe we are the leaders to be showing people the way, and especially our children.
Yes. Yes, because all of us, we all have girls that are watching us. I know, Glenda, you have a son as well, but that was my motivation to not only get out of the marriage, but to do something they could watch, you know, and help them grow as well. And at least if they weren't interested in that moment, they watch you. They always watch you. Always watch and listen.
And maybe when they're young, you know, they criticize, but as they grow, because I've seen it, my children are both adults now in their 30s, and now as they grow, there's more respect, understanding, and somewhat of admiration, in the awe of what you have become or what you have done in your life. So I think it's an important factor that we all realize that, you know, there's the old saying of you never know who's watching. Well, let's even go down to another step further. You never know, never mind who's watching. Who's watching is only one step behind you.
Right.
And it's really important because for me, I want the next generation, and the only one I have control of, or where I actually don't have control, or the only one that I can really affect, let's put it that way, are my children and those closest to. But we have no control over anyone but ourselves. But I'm meaning that, those are the ones who get a front row seat to who we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's a very important and a critical thing is that we have to learn of, how we act and react is from what's going on. And also because when we do that, they follow suit.
Mm-hmm.
And it affects our relationships, which could be positive or negative.
Yeah,
True.
absolutely.
True.
Couldn't agree more.
So, Cindy, you have one child?
I do.
And, as your child was growing up, she was watching mom going through all of these things.
Yes, I'd say so. So who knows what I've downloaded onto her that she's going to have her own stuff to like deal with. And, and I get that too. I mean, hopefully she's seen, quite a bit. She's pretty amazing, actually. I think I look at her and I'm in awe frequently. And just in terms of like, I have two grandbabies now too. So I have a 3-year-old grandson and a 1-year-old grandbaby girl.
Beautiful.
And my daughter has chosen probably the best man that I absolutely love, my son-in-law.
Oh,
I actually think of him as a son. He is, I don't, honestly, I can't say enough good things about him. He is so respectful they have such a great relationship. He's so respectful of her. They give each other space. They're great together. They're so good with the kids. He is so hands-on with his children.
nice.
So hands-on. And again, everybody's got their own story. So I know he's got his own story too. And he just wants to be so involved with his children's lives that it's amazing. But yeah, I look at the two of them and I'm like, wow, you guys really got it together in terms of just the sharing and caring that and the love that they display and the respect that they display for each other. I can't say enough good things about them.
Wow. That's probably quite a relief for you after what you went through also, to know that that's a good, stable family that's going to do right by their children. I never had that.
Yeah.
My girls watched their dad, make fun of me or put me down, him thinking it was funny. And when I was getting a divorce, the one thing I was never going to do was badmouth him because my mother did that to my dad, and it really kind of drove a wedge between us. And I've just kept quiet for all these years. Now, if they ask me something, I'll give them a truthful answer. But as one's 29, one's 21, and now they can see it with their real eyes. They understand without me ever having said a word, So it's real for you to have that. That's wonderful because that has to put your heart at peace to know.
Definitely. I mean, that's what we want for our children, right? Is for them to be successful, however they deem successful, and to be happy in their lives. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And I totally resonate with what you say, Nicole. It's like, when, my ex, I never really talked a lot about my ex to my daughter. I mean, and she never saw, I always made it so that the space was good between us. There was a lot of like stuff that happened. I'll just put it that way. Stuff that happened that probably didn't really, fulfill me in the way that needed to be, but it is what it is, And so I've always tried to keep that door open because early on, and again, I feel almost fortunate in a way that we split when she was so young. So she didn't have to see any of a certain dynamic, if you will. She was very much protected from that, I think. And so she got to see, two different types of lifestyles, not judging them, not one's better than the other. And like I said, I always kept the door open for him because I just had respect from this perspective. It's still her father.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Right?
that's what you have to remember, you know. Yeah, you
Still
know, and
her
I
father, yeah.
still her father, and you know, sometimes I just want to apologize for picking him, but you know, that is still their dad, and you know, it is what it is for whatever lessons we needed to learn. And I know I learned a lot, but it just, you know, I look back at him and it's like I send him love because I have cleared my heart because he doesn't love himself. And I've been very silent about that because that is still their father. Just like you said, it's their dad.
But we're also in a new world now where, you know, when we were growing up as children, it wasn't the same type of world. Today, you have so much out there to learn. Like, I remember when my kids were just babies, I was already starting to read books and going to lectures on parenting and things like that. That didn't exist when our families were,
Mm-mm.
you know, when we were kids.
Mhm.
So we have time and especially more so now, you know, to start to learn and to build and see, because, you know, look at all three of us are in the industry that we're in. We're all coaches. We're all here to help build people. We've already done the work and continue. Like, the work never ends.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's what, you know, once you understand and you recognize that no matter what we go through, we're still learning, we're still going. And that's why we, you know, one of the greatest parts of having mentors and people that have been where you have is you can continue to learn and to grow from above. And then we can continue teaching from whoever is from underneath us. So it's a beautiful, different world in that respect.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And Cindy, I'm curious, if you put each job in a hand and looked at it, how do you feel now about what you're doing versus what you did? I mean, are you like just so happy with this helping people? And because you said you enjoyed your career.
You know, I did, because I think that, you know, the coach hat was always on. So I
Mhm.
was always kind of like coaching people anyway in all the roles that I had. I was always like in some kind of like project management type of thing, dealing with teams and whatnot. Fulfilling, they're both fulfilling in different ways, but I really feel that like the coaching, the yoga, the Reiki, EFT, that to me is more of like here. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the left and right brain, right? So the very fulfilling from an logical thinking brain, if you will, from that perspective, working in science, it really gave me that piece, that I really enjoy that too, the thinking part and trying to think and figure things out. But this is so much more heart centered. And so for me, again, it's not that I wasn't happy then. There were some jobs that I wasn't happy in. I'll put you that way. You know, I mean, you know, there was some very fulfilling parts of it, but this is far more fulfilling and heart centered to me. And to be able to help other people, you know, move through whatever they need to move through. And I still find that even with clients, it's really interesting. I'm sure you do too. That it's teacher, student, teacher, right? I still learn things from my clients
Oh,
all
yes.
the time. Well, I was like, wow, you know, because again, it's you know, to me it's like apples, oranges, bananas, but it's all still fruit, right? So their scenario might be different than my scenario, but the theme is still there. But I'll get another nugget going, wow, never thought of it. Yeah, you know, okay, now, and it totally resonates with me in a different kind of like light. So yeah, I think this to me is the true where I need to be. It's taken me a long time to get here, and that's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay that it took me 60 years to decide to like jump in, you know, full time. But yeah, I feel very fulfilled at this point in my life.
And I like that you're talking about that because that helps us with acceptance of everyone too. Because I always say I've never had two clients have the same healing. Everything's different. Everything's on a timeline, and every reaction is different. So it's just you start understanding that with those differences, we can still come together and love one another as we are. No judgments.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do a lot of groups. I think you know this, Nicole. I mean, that's part of what I like to do is small, intimate container groups. And and you're right. I mean, it is. That's why I say it's the apple, orange, pear, banana, whatever. But to be able to come into a place where you have that safe, non-judgmental space to just be able to be and share, and like this is beautiful. What you are doing, you and Glenda are doing, I think is wonderful, to bring this to the world, to just have these kind of like conversations and to let other people know, hey, you're not all alone. If any of this resonates, if you got a nugget that you can take away, great, and plant a seed and let it grow within you. It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the greatest lessons in life, and this is what unfortunately is happening today, because one of the biggest areas that people do claim to feel is lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to do, whether COVID was the Achilles heel to it, whether social media, some things, I don't know where it all starts, but we're in a world now where there's more loneliness, different, like people are now, not coming together as much. So yeah, I think that, these type of messages that we're saying are really important, that have to come out to people so they realize that we're actually more similar than we are different.
Yeah. And I'm just glad we're finally talking about all this. For so long, I kept some of my knowledge to myself, for fear of being judged, whether it was trauma, cellular memory, past lives, anything like that. Oftentimes it was met with resistance. And so I just stopped talking about it. And now it's, depending on who it is, but it is my truth. I'm coming from a place of it's okay because I've experienced it. And I think the more we talk about things like this openly, honestly, maybe you've never experienced it, but that's okay.
Yeah. I'm so with you in terms of like sharing. I think, I was telling Nicole the other day, I said that this is my first entree into like putting myself out there like this, to actually like tell a little bit of my story. Woo! And share. And because I had, again, visibility block. It was like, the vulnerability shield came back up. I was like, I don't know, I don't know if I can do this. But I'm finding the more, as you say, the more that we can just tell our stories from our hearts and let people know what we've been through, and not worry about what other people think. I mean, I'm a huge Brené Brown fan. I love her. I'm sure you both do too. And the whole daring greatly, and just, her TED talk of like, if you're not putting yourself into the arena, if you want to sit back and shoot your arrows, okay. But if you're not putting yourself out there and in the arena, then you know what? I'm just going to let it all wash over. And so this is an entree in for me to like it's my year of yes. Glenda, just so that you know, that was my power word for this year. It's to say yes to things that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable, maybe a year or two ago. But I'm feeling more comfortable now to just start really expressing more of who I am and who I'm becoming, because I'm still becoming.
Yes. I love that. I know. And I was so embarrassed when I found out my husband had cheated on me that I told the girls, because I found out, I told you, Cindy, through my 6th grader. And I was so embarrassed and ashamed that he cheated on me that I'm like, we can't tell anybody. This stays in the family. And while I wouldn't want to go out and just tell strangers, but I didn't do anything wrong, yet I was ashamed. And I think that things like that if we can talk about that and help people understand that, yes, I did feel that way at one time, but with healing, with growth, with understanding, with finally loving myself, I got to a place where now I can share it. And like you say, if one person hears something, I'm good with that.
Yeah. Again, it is a journey. It's been a long journey for me, and it's okay. I think that's the thing, that it can be okay, that it takes a couple of decades to like work through your stuff. You know what I mean? I think some people are like, well, why, I got to get there quick. And so they start doing the whole shoulding on themselves. I should have, how come I'm not getting this quicker or whatever? And it's like, just breathe it's okay. It's going to be, 2 steps forward, maybe 1 step back, and it's okay. Right.
And if
Because now you're here.
If it took 20 years to accumulate, you don't get it done in a day.
Exactly.
And that's
it's funny because I equate it to the old albums, the old vinyl. I'm like, you know what? I've been on this planet a really long time, so the grooves are really deep. You know what I mean? So it takes a while to like snap the record in half, lay down new tracks. I mean, this just takes a little bit of time. I know we're so used to instant gratification, in our society nowadays, but it does take time, and to give yourself the grace and the patience. And the permission to like say, you know what, I'm going to stumble and bumble. I'm not going to get this right away, right? I'm going to have to repeat it over and over again until I do kind of get it. And, and I still have times when I like stumble and bumble, but now I'm coming into the place now where, as you say, self-love, I'll stumble and bumble. There are certain people that would know how to push my buttons. And, I can get into that whole reactive mode if their energy is, and then I find that I'm starting to like get sucked into their energy. And I'm like, nope.
Not doing it.
I'll just start tapping on one point. I'll just start doing the collarbone point, and if I do end up raising my voice, so I'll give you an example. My mom, I love my mom to death. She's great, but she's getting, she's up in her 80s now. She knows how to push buttons big time. She's very negative, unfortunately, with the world at this point in time. And so I find that I can get sucked into that. And so she'll be raising her voice, and then I'm trying, not even trying, I'm setting a boundary.
Like
I'm setting the boundary in terms of how I'm talking to her, whatever. But then there'll be one thing that'll be said, and I'll be like, and I'll raise my voice to her. And I'll be like, okay. And then I hang up, we go on our merry way. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So before I can go, this is what I've learned. Before that I can even allow myself to start shooting on myself, because that's what happens. I'll go right into should, shame, and guilt, that little cycle. Okay, no. And I say this out loud, and I'm just going to give myself some love right now, because you know what? I'm human. I'm perfectly imperfect.
Yes.
And yep. I raised my voice for a moment. And it happened, and I'm just going to give myself some love right now. I'll just put my hands on my heart center. I'll do some yoga breathing, and then I pick up the phone. Hi, Mom. I just want to tell you how much I love you. That's all. Boom, done. Now I'm not holding on to anything. I course corrected immediately, and I didn't have to go into I should have done this or I shouldn't have done. I don't want any of that negative self-talk to like be hanging out in here, right? No. You go away. Give your self-talk a name. Right? Big bad Beatrice, go away. I hear you. And no, talk to the hand right now. Here, I'm going to come here. So, so I'm like saying, there's no way. Am I ever going to be perfect? No.
No such thing. Never will be.
And that's the whole thing. We just have to realize that we're perfectly imperfect, and that's the way that we should be. And, holding on to our hearts. So, as we're starting to get close to the end, and I told you time flies when you're having
so fast. Yeah.
Okay. So there's somebody that's going through, and here's the thing that we talked about early at the beginning when I mentioned, as women, we don't tend to care for ourselves as much as we should. That's one of the should-haves, right? What can you say with all your practice and that you can advise other women who are now maybe busy with kids and all the rest, and maybe life is sort of trembling around and maybe a few pieces are falling off? What is the thing you can suggest?
I think the first thing you need to do is just start looking at how you feel, right? Tune into how you're feeling. And then from there, you got to see what's your pattern of behavior, right? It's always awareness first. Just tune into how you're feeling. If you're exhausted all the time and you're tired of feeling exhausted all the time, okay, switch up the pattern. And that just means, okay, maybe, again, I hear it all the time. I got this, I got that. Okay, you got it all. Schedule some time for yourself. One of the things that I did way back when is I literally would put an appointment on the calendar, right? Treat it as if it's a doctor's appointment, so there's no excuses that you can't do it, because oh, I used to make so many excuses. Oh, but I got this and this and this to do. No, treat it. You have to set yourself, I'm going to start treating this as if it were a doctor's appointment. And you set aside the time for yourself just so that you can start to, right? Because so many of the women I deal with are stressed out or exhausted. I won't even say stressed out. They're exhausted because they're just running. Key critical. Feel into it. Are you tired of feeling exhausted? Because you're telling me you're tired, right? I mean, you hear it all the time. It's like, I'm so tired. Okay. How are you feeling your well? What are you doing to fill your well? And start small. It doesn't mean that you have to, I got to change everything 2 steps. No, just pick one thing and try it it's going to be an experiment.
Yeah.
Pick one thing that you want to try. Do it for a full week. See how you feel with it. For me, it was like, I'm just going to go and soak in a tub. I'm literally going to go and soak in a tub for just 20 minutes. I'm just going to go and take a 20-minute tub. That's it. And just soak and that's it. So it can be simple. It doesn't have to be anything that says, oh, I gotta join a gym membership. You don't have to do any of that. Keep it so simple. I'm going to go ahead and enjoy a cup of tea and just watch what's outside or take a walk. Simple, but feel it. Feel into your body. I think that to me is the biggest thing, is start to become more aware of how you're feeling and what do you want to do with that.
I love it. And it's so true. That alone can make a major difference in somebody's life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. I'd love to have you back and go into it. And we have so many different angles that we could talk about because, we only just begun.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me in.
Oh, I knew she'd be a great guest.
Yeah, you're welcome into our house anytime. Our house, our home is your home.
All right. Well, you're welcome into my casa anytime too.
Yeah, thank you. Nicole, what's your big takeaway from today?
There's so much packed into this 1 hour that it's really hard to find just that one little piece and set it aside because all of it's so important. But I think when it comes down to we have to take care of ourselves. We have to show ourselves love. We have to be kind with ourselves and accepting of who we are. And we can't pour into others until we pour into ourselves. And it's not selfish. I think as women, we've been taught, from a little girl, that's a little bit selfish. It's really not. I don't know who started that, but we need to eradicate that from our vocabulary and our mentality. And we do have to take care of ourselves. And remember, someone's always watching. So if you start taking care of yourself and wow, she's doing that, you can be that ripple for other people saying, well, if she can soak in a tub for 20 minutes, I guess I can do that too. So you're actually giving someone without your knowledge, you're giving them permission to love themselves, take care of themselves, and treat themselves kindly. Because if you don't do it first, if you don't love and respect yourself enough to do that first, then you're teaching people how to treat you like an ex-husband. So, I look back and I didn't realize it at the time, many years ago, like we talked about, no one talked about this. But I want it moving forward. I want my girls to understand they're just as important as anybody, to love yourself, treat yourself, take care of yourself, and be that ripple for someone else.
It's beautiful. Thank you. I love it. So as we depart today on another journey of Let's Get Real, I want to thank you very much for joining us today on this wonderful conversation that we had. And I'm just going to put in my 2 cents worth about the one thing is we always worry about what others are saying. But can we stop for a moment and just look at what you're saying to your own self?
Mm-hmm.
Start really with self first, and everything else goes on from then. So remember, just as we've all been told today, the number one person really to begin with and filling your own pot, your own glass, whatever it may be, is to do it for yourself. Thank you today for joining us. And until next time, bye for now.